Bright yellow lands radiated as a humble Viking was summoned by his true love. Between them stood the vicious cycle of ruthless violence. The young Thors launched into battle alongside the mad Viking warrior, Thorkel. Their might was unmatched, and their vigor was untamed. Hundreds had fallen through their sheer resolve, and now, amidst a cacophony of crashing melodies, these two soldiers move forward with the will to conquer and decimate anything that stands in their path. None shall endure the wrath of the ancient Vikings, and all will experience the terror of warfare. Vinland Saga is a story of glory, redemption, and repentance. For after Thors was done with the battle, he left that path behind him and started a new chapter. Behold, heir to the greatest Viking to have ever graced the screens of Vinland Saga, Thorfinn is the name, and mischievousness is the game. Thorfinn led a quiet and humble life as a farmer in the outskirts of an island. Secluded from modern society, this boy knew nothing of the outside danger that awaits. As the thunder rumbled and the seas roared, his uncle narrated of a safe haven they once encountered. Yes, the magical land of Vinland. Therein is the source of the legend, the myth of Valhalla, and the belief in an afterlife. Vinland is not just an idea, it was a religion. It was their heaven which they spread through stories, and the hell which prevented their salvation. The faith of its existence was brought into question, and as expected, blind faith was required from the children. Thorfinn wasn't like the others, nor was his father, Thors, who forfeited his old life as a royal soldier, and instead chose to live the reclusive life of a traditional father. One fateful day, as he was tidying up the house with his stubborn daughter, she noticed an aberration inside the snow. She eventually managed to dig up a human corpse. While Thorfinn was still doubtful of the existence of Vinland, he complained about his current situation, while his uncle Leif insisted on its existence. Meanwhile, Thors was trying to revive the escaped slave when a bunch of men came for his life. The leader started picking a fight with them, and this man looked terrifying. Soon after, the man passed away in peace, and Thors decided to bargain with the men to give him a proper burial. What a righteous warrior. Elsewhere, Vikings were bathing in peace when they were suddenly ambushed. These lands show no mercy to the weak, and the children were fighting a mock battle in preparation for the future. Afterwards, Thorfinn kept on begging Leif to take him along the journey. Quite the curious lad we have here. Thors was then told of a warship that arrived, and it seems they were Vikings who served the royal army. The Yams Viking warriors saluted Thors since he was their previous leader. That is before he chickened out and escaped. Despite being considered a deserter, the current leader, Floki, decided to spare him if he joined their cause once again. Even so, Thors declined his offer until Floki threatened the peace of the village. What a low blow from these callous mercenaries. Thor's hands were tied, and later that night, he felt miserable about the entire situation. He told his family what happened and why he escaped the battlefield. The following day, the villagers were preparing their warships in preparation, and Thors was called upon to treat the injured children. Is this man proving to be a complete human being? Talk about an idle role model. Later on, Thorfinn went digging in the storage room and found an auspicious-looking dagger. However, his dad interrupted his wholesome barbaric moment and scolded his intentions to kill. Quite the pious words from a previous killer. Elsewhere, the Yams Vikings made a visit to a ruthless group of Vikings, and Floki was negotiating terms with their leader, Askeladd. Floki offered him gold in return for Thor's head. Wait a minute. Why would Floki seek the downfall of the greatest warrior alive? Perhaps he wants to steal the glory for himself. Man, this is so confusing. Especially after he paid him a visit and offered him a job. What were these men planning? Elsewhere, Thorfinn's sister was being asked out by a reckless newbie, while the enthusiastic villagers were ready to sail out. Teenagers who have never seen the reality of battle, oh boy, are they in for one rude awakening. Leif told one of their lovers not to worry, and it seems Thorfinn was missing from action. Afterward, they were ready to head out, and Thors bid his family a warm farewell. On the boat, Thors was holding his own, while the weaklings started complaining incessantly. It's their first day, and they're already exhausted. Out of nowhere, Thorfinn popped the barrel open and stood in awe of the glorious ocean. What an amazing sight to behold. Askeladd, on the other hand, was contemplating the details of the battle, while Thors was worried for the safety of his child and his crew. One of the crew members asked him how the thrill of the battle felt, and Thors decided to narrate his story from the beginning. After the birth of his first child, he still had to return to the battlefield, and that was the moment he realized the significance of family. The following day, they were nearing a narrow ridge, and Leif was instructing everyone how to approach. His instincts started screaming at him, and as expected, they were trapped by debris. Before they knew it, another warship emerged, and Askeladd was leading the count. Thors told them not to worry and handed Thorfinn a dagger to protect himself. Things were about to go down, and Thors jumped onto their ship like Superman on steroids. He knocked down the men one at a time and proved to be lethal. His moves were elegant and beautiful to watch. I would genuinely pay to watch him fight in a UFC ring. Thors was definitely him. And after getting rid of the fodder, the berserker Bjorn lost control and started attacking his own men. This guy was a walking monster and tried attacking Thors head-on. However, he stood no chance against our heroic Viking. What a monstrous aura this man possessed. Meanwhile, Askeladd tried boarding their ships, but was thwarted single-handedly by the man of the hour. Leif told everyone to back down and left it to their leader. Just then, Thors challenged Askeladd to a one-on-one duel, and these two squared off in an ancient macho showdown. As Thors slowly closed the gap, Askeladd tried using his speed to catch him off guard, but this didn't work, and he was left wondering his options. Thors apologized and launched into battle, and man, this guy was tough. Askeladd was on the defensive, and the battle seemed one-sided. Despite breaking Thor's sword, he was blindsided and caught lacking. What an ingenious move. Afterward, Thors asked Askeladd to give up, but the man refused to budge an inch. Thors then broke into an MC moment and started narrating his backstory. However, this was all a rouse to stall for time until Bjorn held Thorfinn captive. Damn, these guys were fighting dirty. What a cheap move. Out of desperation, Thors threw the sword and gave up. Soon after, he was shot by a series of arrows, and the man stood his ground in spite of the fatal wound. This is unfair, and here I was admiring his strength and bravery. Thorfinn was distraught by what happened, while Askeladd was left ruminating in the silence of the night. He then saw Thorfinn tailing them in another boat, and decided to let him live to honor his father. The following day, the rascals were enjoying their trip while Thorfinn was dying of thirst. I'm starting to feel sorry for the kid. Whilst Askeladd and his men enjoyed their time, he was struggling to keep up. Soon enough, he was too feeble to even move, and started growing delirious. He then witnessed a village on fire, and it seemed Askeladd was causing a huge ruckus. These guys are worse than pirates. Thorfinn then snuck into Askeladd's chamber and was ready to slaughter him in his sleep. However, he hesitated, since he considered it dishonorable. What a bozo. The next day he challenged Askeladd to a duel, and the leader had no choice but to accept. As he charged towards him, Askeladd started to toy with him like a rag doll. Soon enough, he received the reward for Thor's head and didn't seem pleased about it. Meanwhile, Thorfinn was starving and couldn't find any edible plants nearby. Elsewhere, Leif broke the news to the family, and they seemed unbothered by it, especially his daughter, who jumped straight to work. What a ferocious gal. Does she have no emotions? She must be one of those sociopaths. However, one fateful day, her mother told her to let it out, and she broke down into tears while Thorfinn was practicing to avenge his father. Bjorn came along and told him to buzz off, and it seems Askeladd wanted to keep him around like a pet. Later on, Thorfinn was confronted by a wolf, but managed to injure and kill it. He then decided to train with the dagger his father gave him, and was determined to become the next John Wick. You know, because of his revenge arc and all. The next day, Askeladd and his men were ready to head out when Thorfinn challenged him to another duel. After accepting the challenge, Thorfinn showed improvement, but was far from reaching his level. The boy still has more to go, it seems. He then joined their crew after striking a deal with Askeladd. If Thorfinn proved himself as a worthy warrior on the battlefield, Askeladd agreed to fight him, but till then, he was to serve alongside the troops. The troops made it to another village and noticed a bunch of soldiers smooching the ground. That's code for deceased, by the way. Later that night, Thorfinn was struggling to make ends meet, while Askeladd was striking a deal with the Danish army. He wanted gold in return for their service, and they were suddenly ambushed by the English. These lands sure are treacherous. The young lad stood frozen and was faced with his first real opponent. Fortunately for him, Askeladd came to his rescue, and he finally mustered up the courage to land his first victim. Upon this day, upon this very hour, Thorfinn finally evolved into a man. Attaboy. Following this, Thorfinn ended up being a bloodthirsty demon with skills as sharp as his father. Despite his tiny stature, this kid was something else. An unstoppable beast was born, and the son of Thors was starting to make a name for himself. In the dead of night, he was being chased by vicious hounds, and the following day, 2 innocent bystanders found him unconscious. After nursing him back to health, Thorfinn awoke from his slumber and decided to act like a normal civilian. After all, he was a wanted fugitive. He refused to speak and continued to chomp down his food. The old lady took pity on him and started brushing his hair, but then they lied to the officials about it. The young lady started scolding her mother, and that's when Thorfinn decided to trigger the signal, informing Askeladd and his men. The villagers started running for dear life, and that's when they saw the real demonic side of Thorfinn. Oh man, look what you did, young man. You broke her heart and betrayed her trust. What a vicious and cruel cycle. Elsewhere, in the capital of Denmark, Floki submitted his report to the king and was subsequently awarded. The pirates, however, were looking for their next big paycheck and headed towards another battlefield. 2 nations were at war, and they seemed adamant about the entire situation. Who were these guys? It didn't matter to Askeladd, though, who simply wanted to get paid. As such, he insisted on helping the attacking side and sent Thorfinn as his loyal messenger. At this point, revenge wasn't even an option, since he was still weak. He blazed through and held one of the guards captive. This granted him a meeting with the leader, who seemed like a scrawny brat. Thorfinn suggested taking matters into their own hands in return for some gold. After the leader agreed, he signaled the mercenaries who started climbing the cliff. The following day, Thorfinn was being interrogated by the scrawny punk when his army engaged in battle. Things were not going their way, and Thorfinn launched into battle alone, while Askeladd and his men came through like a torpedo. They managed to carry the warship as they stormed the fortress and used the sea to gain an upper hand. They were bombarded with arrows, but this didn't deter them. All of a sudden, Thorfinn launched at them and decimated his way, bringing an end to the leader. This gave Askeladd and his men a free pass to rummage through and tear the place to shreds. As the pompous leader rode inside, feeling cocky and arrogant, a soldier came boring bad news. The treasury was all gone, and it seems the pirates plundered everything right from under their noses. I can't lie, this was a genius move. You gotta give it to them, they sure pulled a successful heist. After pulling off the robbery, heading back to his hometown, feeling proud and boastful, his army were in a jolly mood, even though Thorfinn was still embittered. The haul he brought shocked everyone, and even riled up the younglings to join him. That's one way to inspire the lads and the ladies. Talk about a player. But his boring uncle had to ruin the vibe by discussing financial matters. This guy was a frugal accountant who was obsessed with the weight of silver. Reminds me of Mr. Krabs, to be honest. Money-obsessed freaks who live their lives in pursuit of wealth and wealth alone. These men have no honor. Soon after, Askeladd and Thorfinn engaged in another duel, since he brought the head of the general for him. This time around, I feel Thorfinn will perform much better, and as expected, he had him on the defensive. Even so, he still lacked the strength to keep up, and speed alone wasn't sufficient. He also needed experience and a cool head, since Askeladd's provocation got to him. Never let emotions get the best of you, kid. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how he lost his third battle. What a decisive victory. Later that night, the men partied and enjoyed themselves to the fullest. After all, they did earn the victory. Who's to stop them? While everyone feasted inside, our boy was contemplating his life decisions, hallucinating his father and crying his eyes out. This must be tough for him. Just then, the maid came to help and nearly got her throat slit. She brought him some food and tried initiating a conversation. Thorfinn despised her weakness, since he didn't believe in slavery or lying down. After all, this man has the blood of a true warrior. He fears nothing or no one, and soon enough, he'll surpass his old man and find the ancient land of Vinland. Elsewhere, Floki welcomed the king, who gave the army strict commands to protect the country and his son. As they sailed out, you can tell why the Danish were the superpowers of the land. However, there was one obstacle stopping them, and this man was Thor's previous partner, Thorkel the Giant. No one was going through the London Bridge, and not even Askeladd had a chance. This wasn't an easy job, and he started contemplating whether it was worth it or not. Bjorn tried backing him up, however. He resorted to using Thorfinn as usual, instead of getting his hands dirty. However, this wasn't the same kid he met all those years ago. This man was a whole different beast altogether. Come to think of it, these two have quite the strange dynamic going on. Soon after, they saw Floki and his men rowing to the bridge, and they were under heavy attack until Thorkel intervened. This man was humongous, to say the least. Floki then read a proclamation from the king demanding Thorkel back to his army. Even so, the big guy wasn't bothered by all of this and simply wanted to fight. What a maniac. He then chugged a gigantic boulder at them, scaring them off like rodents. Floki informed the king of the treachery, and the Danish officially went to war underneath the famous London Bridge. This one, however, refused to fall down, since it had Thorkel as a savior. A one-man army, to be honest. Soon after, Askeladd got close enough to the bridge to allow Thorfinn to make his grand entrance. My boy was pulling off moves you'd expect from Levi Ackerman. Does this kid have no remorse? Thorkel accepted his challenge, and these two were David and Goliath in comparison. Even so, things weren't going the way he expected, since he lacked the necessary height and strength to overwhelm him. Even so, his technique was flawless, and his durability was insane. Just then, Thorfinn caught the big guy lacking and snatched his fingers. He then told him his name and how he was a son of Thor's before escaping. What an unexpected turn of events. Meanwhile, the king was scolding Floki and his men for their failure. He then told him to take his son, Canute, to lead a fleet and head west. The prince is about to have his hands full with this one. Elsewhere, Thorfinn barely made it out alive, with a dislocated shoulder, while Thorkel was complaining since they withdrew. This guy was a battle-holic, to be honest. Now that the heat died down, Thorkel started chugging rocks at them. God damn, how powerful is this guy? He reminds me of Garp from One Piece. Sheer power, capable of destroying armies. The chief in charge told them to back down, since they were no match for the giant. He then went to the prince in hopes of receiving his blessing. Thorfinn, on the other hand, was having a pleasant dream, in which he saw his family and friends enjoying themselves. He then called out to his father and received a piggyback ride from the greatest hero in Viking history. If only they kept Thor's for a few more episodes, Vinland would have been top 10 for sure. The mood suddenly shifted, and Thorfinn saw his village being burned, which forced him to wake up. What a terrible nightmare. Was the place he saw Vinland, though? The rest of the gang were minding their own business, feasting on their spoils. However, the soldiers seemed uneasy about the entire situation, since they weren't given any breaks. Let's hope they don't rebel. It seems some of the men got into a scuffle, while Thorfinn tried blowing off some steam. He had a lot weighing in his mind and felt lost and confused. Amidst his contemplation, Askeladd announced his presence and explained the current situation to him. This little chat of theirs turned sour in an instant, when Thorfinn reminded him of his betrayal. Since he backstabbed Thor's after losing the fight, it was a dishonorable defeat. Even so, Askeladd was only focused on the present situation and the ongoing war between the Danish and the English. That's where the money is. Suddenly, a lone messenger came by and tried interrogating them. What a cocky brat. However, he gave them valuable information by telling them of Thorkel's pursuit. It seems the bloodthirsty giant went on a rampage and annihilated the remaining forces. Now that they were done here, they decided to head towards the main force. To make matters worse, they held the prince as hostage, and this forced Askeladd to make the first move. Now we're talking business. Meanwhile, Thorkel and his men were living large now that they abducted the prince. They even started fantasizing about the women and ransom money they were going to receive. Aren't these guys jumping the gun too early, though? They kept on mouthing off since they had Thorkel on their side, and even started tantalizing the prince, who was scared shitless. After all, this guy grew up pampered and spoiled. The front lines of battle is the last place he'd ever imagined to be, especially with a mad berserker like Thorkel, who is craving a decent fight. This entire situation is maddening. The lunatic giant started talking about Valhalla and his desire to die in battle. Oh yeah, I almost forgot Vikings had this weird obsession with martyrdom. The priest then lost it until he was given some booze. What kind of holy man is this? All of a sudden they sensed danger lurking in the horizon, and Thorkel was right on the money. How did they even know? The Danish tried scaring him off and asked for Canute. However, the soldiers were tempted to fight the agonizing Thorkel, who kept on provoking them. Oh man, don't fall for it. This guy is aching to battle. Oh well, don't say I didn't warn you. To make matters worse, Askeladd and his men were close by as they awaited the result of the battle. However, it was obvious that this was an onslaught. Elsewhere, the pirates were incinerating the forest in hopes of driving them to a corner. Thorkel figured this was a trap. Even so, he wasn't willing to back down. Soon after, Askeladd gave Thorfinn the command to kidnap the prince, and you can tell this man was a spawn of Satan. The prince and his men were ambushed and things were looking dire, until Thorfinn decided to join the fray. That is, the assassin clad in robes started wiping the floor with them, one man against an entire group. Oh wait, is that Thorkel? How unfortunate. Thorkel then told him his mother's name and admired his father, since he was the only man who beat him in battle. He then bid them adieu, since the fire was growing worse. Soon after, Thorfinn brought the prince back to Askeladd, who feigned loyalty, and this goaded the prince to reveal his true form. Afterward, Askeladd went to an old fisher looking for information and transportation. The man tried haggling him, and they both agreed on a fair price to deliver the letter. Meanwhile, they were on a lookout for Thorkel, and it seemed they had a mutant in their rank. This weirdo was bestowed with super hearing and was able to detect the slightest of fluctuations. In order to combat Thorkel, Askeladd requested for reinforcements and tried to make some headway in the meantime. With the mad giant breathing down their neck, these guys haven't had a decent break in days. The entire gang was exhausted, and Bjorn was growing weary of the entire process. His frustration was boiling up and decided to confront Askeladd about it. After asking him what happened, he confessed how the prince looked more like a princess instead of a rightful king, and this bothered him. The crew then continued their march as usual, with a lot of his men growing anxious and debilitated. They've been walking for days without proper sleep or food. Soon enough, they came across two men, and Askeladd bent the knee. He hailed one of the men as the commander, who summoned a fleet of warships behind him. Meanwhile, Thorkel was left stumped by their unexpected escape. It seems he may have underestimated them. They went into the whales, and Ragnar started throwing demands around, seeking to take one of the ship. However, this wasn't acceptable, and Thorfinn was assigned as the prince's bodyguard. The commander came by and made the prince swear fealty to the whales. Was this guy really supposed to be the next king? The men continued their march once again, and this time around, the morale of the soldiers was lit once again. Women, booze, status, all the treasures a man desires. The priest then disdained their love for materialistic desires and insisted on the glory of the afterlife. The commander, however, was having doubts, since he was yet to acknowledge the prince as the next heir to the throne. The prince didn't make things easy either, playing with his hair and acting all feeble. All of a sudden they sensed trouble brewing, and we were on the verge of a full-blown battle. Time for another round, boys. Elsewhere, Floki was submitting his report as usual when the king asked what happened to his son. He explained how Thorkel invaded and kidnapped him, and this caused the king to grow anxious and worried. Meanwhile, arrows had their eyes set on Askeladd and his men when he spoke their tongue and asked to discuss matters peacefully. The commander tried pleading with him, but the opposing party wasn't willing to talk. They intended to kidnap the prince and use him as leverage against the king. After realizing their intentions, Askeladd called upon the prince to make a speech, and the man freaked out. What a wimp. He failed everyone, and Ragnar decided to have his back. How long does this man seek to protect the youngling? Left with no option, Askeladd decided to talk to their leader alongside the commander. They secluded themselves from the others and continued to bargain. It seems they were all in cahoots, and all this was a ruse to fool the others. Bjorn was confused about the whole situation, and the opposing leader was taken aback after hearing Askeladd was both Wales and Danish and came from royal blood. Talk about a plot twist. Askeladd was a descendant of a heroic warrior who brought peace to the lands, and because of this, he planned to infiltrate the kingdom and save the land of Wales from the inside. What a crazy plan. After hearing all this, Askeladd vowed to do the right thing, and they continued their march pretending to be prisoners of war. Quite the ingenious strategy. While they were walking, the prince decided to speak up and left everyone rattled. It seems Thorfinn got to him and hit a nerve. Soon after, he signed a treaty with the commander, and things were going according to plan. Elsewhere, a beautiful brunette was playing in the snow, praying to her deity when she was called for supper. She looked quite stunning, honestly. Meanwhile, the priest was drowning himself outside while the boys kept teasing him. Is this man supposed to be a man of God or a devotee of the devil? He then turned the tables on them and started questioning their camaraderie, and the topic suddenly shifted towards Thor's and their encounter with the legend. This sparked the curiosity of the priest who was looking for something to believe in. I'm guessing he considered Thor's one of God's warrior. Later that night, the storms were going crazy, and the men started complaining like little wimps. Were they really planning on walking through this blizzard? Meanwhile, the brunette and her family were having a wholesome family dinner when the father started preaching the gospel to them. He started scaring them off with the concept of hell, judgment, and retribution. Afterward, the pretty lady went out to admire the ring she stole from the market and started feeling guilty. Just then, the family was interrupted by Bjorn and his men, who stormed inside and made themselves home. They gathered all the loot, and the men of the village started pleading for their lives. However, Askeladd removed them all from the map without hesitation or mercy. How do you even justify this? The brunette saw the whole incident and was left speechless. Her entire family was gone, but for some reason, she wasn't able to shed any tears for them. What a psychopath. Meanwhile, the king was facing a crisis on his hand, since the rightful heir of the throne was still missing. Floki tried to ease his concerns, but all to no avail. Thorkel, on the other hand, was lamenting the harsh snows of winter since there won't be any battles till the season was over. He then decided to drink himself silly and forget about the whole situation. At this rate, they were going to finish the town's entire resources. Just then, one of his men told him how the King of England surrendered, and the current King of Denmark, Sweyn, Canut's father, was going to be the next emperor. Quite the disturbing news for our battle junkie. Elsewhere, Askeladd was trying to make his way through and kept on cursing the foolish believers who didn't contribute anything. Their prayers upset him to the core, and Thorfinn considered it useless. As the priest was doubting the Lord and laying blame, the prince got up and screamed at his pitiful complaints. Thorkel, however, was told of Askeladd's location and the current situation he was in. Quite the ideal time to strike and kidnap the prince once again. Using the mutant with super hearing, Askeladd was able to sniff out Thorkel's approach and decided to make a run for it. The men were told to pack up and prepare for battle, since trouble was brewing close by. Even so, the prince wasn't bothered and continued to make his meal in peace. Thorfinn was dumbfounded by this, since he hadn't had a decent home-cooked meal in a solid minute. But seriously, the prince has at least one good talent, and here I thought he was a good-for-nothing bum. A soldier then came by and informed them of the ongoing battle. This infuriated Ragnar, who had a few words for the brazen leader. The men offered to escort him there, and amidst their travels, they ended up stabbing him in the back, literally. What a cowardly move. But then again, these men were pirates. It was to be expected. Soon after, Askeladd came by and promised to keep Canut safe and replace him as the official protector. Ragnar was disgusted by this man's presence, but he was too weak to even lift his sword, let alone fight back. With his dying words, he told Askeladd how the king tried to have his son killed and urged him to return the boy safe and sound. Farewell, Ragnar. You fought well. Askeladd then took his lifeless corpse to the prince and claimed the English caught him off guard. What a sneaky weasel this man is. The prince was lost for words and in a state of disbelief, while Thorfinn was told to look after him. Afterward, Bjorn was questioning Askeladd's decision to execute Ragnar, seeing as how the prince was left in an extremely vulnerable state. Even so, this was a necessary step towards evolving the prince. Askeladd then interrogated the English captain they captured, and this man was brutal and merciless. Even his men were appalled by what they saw. Askeladd then dove into the past and enlightened them all of the history of the land. However, his precious moment was interrupted when he was informed of an approaching vanguard. As expected, it was Thorkel and his men, and my guy was ready to decimate an entire army on his own. Bjorn carried the prince, and after hearing him complain, Askeladd decided to discipline the kid. He then encountered a bunch of deserters and left them rot. Thorkel wasn't ready to welcome them in his group either. What a pitiful demise. It goes to show you the price of loyalty in these areas. After passing the bridge, they decided to break it down in hopes of halting the incoming troop. However, his men were plotting to overthrow him, and the stench of betrayal was running pungent throughout the land. In the horizon, Thorkel and his men approached, and the mad giant made his entrance. Even so, the men refused to follow and surrounded the hopeless leader. Askeladd tried talking his way out, but the men were not having it. Suddenly, our leader started seeing flashbacks of his mother and the magical land she promised him. Who would have thought he was a mama's boy? Prior to the commencement of the battle, he told them how he despised their kind and started the brutal onslaught. With Thorfinn backing him up and Bjorn escaping with the prince, Askeladd was on his own against the entire bunch. Let's see how well he fares, since Thorkel was on his way. Bjorn tried losing them, but they managed to catch up and sabotage his ride. Luckily, the prince was alive, but the fight wasn't far from over. Thorfinn decided to head back and save Askeladd, who looked completely jaded and out of breath. Despite the handicap, he held his own and fought with all his might. God damn, who would have thought he had it in him? Since he fought against Thors, I suspected he wasn't that powerful. Regardless, he was surrounded and struck down by fierce arrows. What a cowardly move. Then again, these were pirates who knew no honor. Just then, Thorkel arrived to the scene and forced everyone to surrender. This man was Hugi and towered above Askeladd. After hearing Thorfinn was fine, he gave the order to annihilate them all. At this point, this was more like a massacre rather than a fight. Thorkel was definitely him and could even defeat a bear in a fight. Even his presence was sufficient to strike the fear of God unto men. All of a sudden, Thorfinn made his way through and launched at Thorkel head-on. Hold up. Did he seriously uppercut a horse? I told you he was him. Soon after, Thorfinn challenged him to a duel and everyone thought he was insane. Not for long though, since Thorfinn was successfully evading all his attacks. The tiny ninja against the gigantic berserker, these two were in completely different weight classes, and to spice things up, Thorkel made him an offer he couldn't refuse. If he defeated him in battle, he promised to tell him everything about his father. Seeing as how the kid was eager to know more, he went at it, while the prince was knocked out cold and started seeing hallucinations of Ragnar. What an auspicious dream from the young lad. It seems fate has chosen to protect him. Even so, this prince was far from being a true king, since he lacked the balls and the vigor to rule and lead an army. Bjorn, however, was on a rampage, laying waste to everyone around him. The priest told him to mind his own business, and these two started chatting like they were in a casual setting. Meanwhile, the epic fight was ongoing, and Thorfinn was actually doing a pretty good job. The mad giant was thrilled and asked Thorfinn what a true warrior entailed, while the prince was asked what true love was. This priest is something else, honestly. For a man of religion, he sure had pessimistic thoughts and abysmal beliefs. Thorfinn, however, answered through violence, since he was a man of few words. Thorkel then managed to launch him high up, and the fall must have been devastating. Bjorn finished the rest of the gang and headed towards the prince with malice in his eyes. Even so, what was once a cowardly boy now evolved into a brave king. He managed to rebuke and stop the berserker using his words and might. What the hell just happened? When did he experience an awakening? Meanwhile, Thorfinn was down for the count since his right arm was completely broken. Fortunately, Thorkel was feeling generous and decided to narrate the tales of Thor's the legend. He told him how he was actually his uncle and lamented the death of his father. However, one fateful night, while stopping bandits, he encountered Thors and rejoiced. Even so, Thors bid him adieu, and this didn't sit right with Thorkel. The mad giant demanded a duel before he left, and things escalated real fast. He defeated him in an instant and told Thorfinn how he admired the man. Afterward, Thorfinn declined to answer his questions, and Askeladd started giving him advice on how to win. However, it was no use, since Thorkel wasn't someone you'd beat in a one-on-one battle. As the giant approached him for the final blow, Thorfinn used the opportunity to knock him to the ground with a strike. Before he could land a blow, Thorkel's men interrupted, and this upset the giant, who felt dishonored. Fortunately for everyone, the evolved prince came through and commanded respect from everyone. Thorkel was screaming from the top of his lungs. He then admitted his defeat and started negotiating with the prince, who revealed how he was a backup for the king. After making an offer to the giant, Thorkel decided to test his resolve, and his eyes reminded him of Thor's. As such, he vowed to serve him and take down the current king. Alongside him, Askeladd sided with them as well. What an unruly bunch. Soon after, they made their way to Denmark and greeted Floki, who was lost for words. The prince's aura caught him off guard, and Askeladd's presence threw him in a state of disarray. As the prince walked through town, he warned Thorkel and Askeladd to be on the lookout since he had a lot of enemies here. Afterward, Askeladd informed him how an assassination would be in order since they wanted the prince out of the picture. Despite the looming threat, the evolved heir wasn't the least bit afraid and marched on with valor. They then entered the king's chamber, and Thorfinn noticed an ensuing ambush. After kneeling before the king, they informed him of Ragnar's death, and the king started conversing with his son one-on-one. The king continued to explain how he got the crown by dethroning his father and how the crown has corrupted his heart. As such, he was left with no option but to get rid of him as well. Even though they were surrounded, Canute wasn't budging, and Askeladd decided to speak up. Using his persuasive words, he managed to convince the king to spare them. What a crafty fellow. The prince gave his gratitude, and Thorkel celebrated their victory in Viking fashion. Soon after, Askeladd and Canute were discussing of ways to assassinate the king, but things weren't going to be that easy. Afterward, Ragnar's brother came by and was informed of his brother's demise. Thorfinn, on the other hand, was training outside in hopes of exacting revenge. The following day, Leif was seen at the harbor feeling depressed, since he still hadn't found Thorfinn. The prince and Askeladd, however, were flaunting their presence across town, rowing through the river like nobles. Just then, an assassin struck an arrow into the prince, and everyone started freaking out. Suddenly, Thorfinn landed beside Leif in a destiny encounter. Even so, Thorfinn's reunion was interrupted by a pompous knight who got smacked. Afterward, he was warmly embraced by Leif, while a woman disguised as the prince was revealed. It seems the prince was all right, and they used the entire situation to reveal his enemies. Thorfinn started explaining things to Leif and how he was out to get revenge. When Leif tried to convince him to return, it caused the little boy to lash out in anger and storm off. Meanwhile, Bjorn was trying to heal up, and Askeladd was nursing him to health. Now that's what you call loyalty. After the attempted assassination, rumors started spreading, and Askeladd's plan was successfully in action. A chess game was underway, and Askeladd was on the winning side. The next day, the prince stood witness to a duel between Bjorn and Askeladd. Wait a minute, why are these two fighting? This made no sense, and Askeladd ending things swiftly. After sending his friend to the afterlife, Thorkel placed his bet on Askeladd. Without wasting any time, Thorfinn launched into action, but alas, he was no match for the callous leader. Would you look at that? Thorfinn had to be saved by the prince after being knocked out. Askeladd then told him why he lost, and it was because he let his emotions get to him. He informed him to keep them in check and hone his skills if he ever plans on beating him. Wise words from a ruthless pirate. He then continued to admonish the prince and carried Bjorn to his grave. I always knew Askeladd had that dog in him. The next day, there was a grand feast underway, and all the big names were present to witness. However, the rumors had them all shaking in their boots, and chaos was brewing inside the royal walls. The king walked in alongside the prince, Thorkel and Askeladd. Thorfinn, however, was contemplating his life. Feeling lost and confused by everything that happened, he decided to vent his frustration on a couple of civilians and got locked up. Meanwhile, the king was addressing his nation and thanked the prince in front of everyone. This guy is more of a sneaky weasel than I expected. However, the king announced that a rebellion was ensuing and decided to invade the Welsh to show his might. Thorfinn, on the other hand, was visited by Leif. The poor man begged him to rethink matters and come with him, since revenge is never a solution. In hindsight, Leif did have a valid argument. He then told him of the time he was stranded at sea and almost lost hope, and how a true Viking should never succumb to defeat. He confirmed the existence of Vinland and promised to find it together, since that was what Thors dreamed of. Elsewhere, the king was rewarding his men, while Askeladd was dumbfounded by the announcement he heard. He tried racking his brain and couldn't fathom what happened. He was then summoned before the king and rewarded 50 pounds of silver. Whoa, that looks like a fortune. The king then continued to provoke him in regards to whales, and Askeladd spoke out contradicting the king. He tried persuading him using smart tactics and prudent words, but the king wasn't having it and approached Askeladd with a disdainful look. He then whispered an offer. He'll spare whales in return for Canute's head. What a devious monarch. Elsewhere, Thorfinn was ready to sail out with Leif until he experienced a sudden realization. He ran back to Askeladd, who started insulting the king in broad daylight. Whoa, when did Askeladd grow a pair of balls? I guess he's always been this way. He held a sword to the king's face and started to threaten him. He then wasted no time beheading the king in one slash. This is insane. He was a one-man army holding them off and wiping the floor with the soldiers. What a brutal savage. Thorkel and the prince watched on as he laid waste to everyone. Without a moment's notice, the prince stabbed a sword through his heart in front of Thorfinn. Is this how Askeladd departs this world? Thorfinn was distraught and decided to lash out on the prince. After being saved by Thorkel, the prince declared himself as king and took control of the throne. Well, that's all for this episode of Vinland Saga. Hope you enjoyed Thorfinn's remarkable journey and ask that you stay tuned, since we have more amazing recaps on the way.